Raised in camp meeting, raised in church, went to church when I was less than a week old, and I don't believe I've missed a week in the last 41 years. Been to church at least once a week during that time. Raised in a church environment. I was over in, trying to think of where that was. It was either Denmark or Holland. It was one of those countries. And it had been 4 or 5, maybe 6 days since I'd been in church, and I was really feeling bad. And I said, Lord, I want to go to church. I want to find some Christians. And I was just out walking, came to a bridge, and started across that bridge, and I heard a hymn. Somebody singing a hymn. And so I followed the music, and here was 3 men, young fellows, on this bridge, playing some guitars and singing hymns. Now, I didn't understand one word that they were saying, but I knew the song, see. So I knew it was a hymn. So I stood beside them, and I started singing it in English while they were singing it in something. And they had handfuls of tracts, and I guess the people been walking by not paying too much attention to them, but when they heard someone in English singing those hymns, we got a big crowd. So I took the tracts away from the one fellow and passed them all out in just about 10 minutes. And then I started in the hymn, and they knew it, and they sang it in their language while I sang it in English. We sang about 5 or 6 hymns, had good church service there in the middle of the bridge, shook hands and walked away, and I felt a whole lot better. So I was in church on a bridge. I guess that kept my record straight of being in church at least once a week, as I think it's good to do. It's good to have camp like this, isn't it? My mother said I went to the altar when I was 3. I don't remember that. I've been there many times since. But I never remember going to bed with a guilty conscience. I don't ever remember going to bed thinking I'm not a Christian. Always was a Christian. I never smoked, I never drank. I was raised in a Christian home. And young people, don't let anyone or the devil tell you you've got to sow your wild oats. You don't have to do it. You don't have to. I started preaching when I was 13, and I don't think I've missed a week of preaching from that time till this. Some place or another. Sometimes it was on the street corner, but I've preached at least every week. Raised in a Christian home. You don't have to sow your wild oats. My father was preaching one night. He was at a camp, and just before he preached, he said, how many people have been delivered from alcohol? And many raised their hands. And how many have been delivered from tobacco? Many raised their hand. And the Spirit of God fell, and they shouted and testified. Some even ran around a little bit. And finally the Spirit subsided enough, and Dad went on and preached. The next night, service turned over to my father, and he stood up ready to preach, and a young boy stood up, young man. And he said, Reverend, last night you asked how many was delivered from this or that or the other. He said, I couldn't raise my hand because I've never smoked. I've never drank. I've never mixed up in those things. But God has kept me from those. And my father said the Spirit of God fell in a greater measure that night than he had the night before on those that were delivered. And many other young people stood with him and said the same. We've never been into sin. And Dad said a greater spirit fell, and there was no preaching in the altars line. There is a greater opportunity to be kept from sin than to be delivered from sin. You don't have to be delivered from sin to have a great testimony. The greater testimony is to say, God kept me from sin. His power to keep. So we thank God for this camp and the young people. We trust in the services as we share a few experiences with you that you'll keep us on your prayer list. We have nothing to say worth listening to unless the Holy Spirit makes words a message. Now, preachers know that, but sometimes laymen don't know that. It's not like you stand up here and push a button and go through a few phrases and it's a service. No. Mechanically, you could say the same thing, but unless the Holy Spirit comes, unless God sanctions the truth, it's just words. And we want more than words, don't we? John 8:32 reads, Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Then said Jesus unto those Jews that believed on him, If ye continue in my word, then are ye my disciples indeed, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Truth is a very rare element in our lives today. When I was younger, I thought truth owed me something. I don't have to worry about making a mistake. If I start to err, God will send an angel to straighten me out, because I don't want to do wrong. I want to do right. I was raised in a Christian home. But the older I get, young people, I find it doesn't work that way. Truth exists for itself. If truth is found, it's because you have sought it. You must be a seeker of truth. Truth exists. Truth is there. If you find truth, you've been pursuing truth. I was over in Israel in 1972. I was there again in 79. And I went to the Wailing Wall. Here was a big hill. They literally put a big wall up and made the hill level and built a temple. And this wall that held back the earth where they built the temple is called the Wailing Wall. And I went to the Wailing Wall, and there were people praying, rocking back and forth. And here were men in earnest prayer. There was no form. They were praying earnestly. And I said to a fellow, what are they saying? They were praying in Hebrew or something. And I didn't understand them. And I said, what are they saying? I was curious to what an Orthodox Jew would be praying at the Wailing Wall. He looked at me a little amazed that I didn't already know. Why, he said, they're praying for God to send the Messiah. And I answered without thinking. I said, well, he already did. No, he said, that was an impostor. And I thought, how wrong could you be? Pray for God to do something. God do that very thing. Reject his answer and pray for almost 2,000 years more. God, when are you going to hurry up and answer prayer? Now, that's a pretty big mistake. It's a good thing that most of the mistakes we make just doesn't make that much difference. Isn't it amazing how people can remember the times we're wrong and they have difficulty remembering the times that we're right? Most of the time, it's not that important. We say, well, I was wrong. Big deal. Sometimes we could make a mistake that would have a long, lasting, tragic effect. The children of Israel made that kind of a mistake when they rejected Christ as the Messiah. Let his blood be upon us. They were pretty sure they was right. And upon our children. They were sure they were right. And our children's children. They thought that was a safe statement. They were so right. They rejected Christ mainly because they said he was born in the wrong place. Well, he comes from Nazareth. No good thing comes from Nazareth. We know this is an impostor. Hear me, young people. All Jesus would have had to have done was said, fellas, before you reject me, would you check my birth certificate? Find out where I was really born. And left it at that. But he didn't. What are you saying that for? I'm saying it because truth many times is evasive. Instead of Jesus plainly telling them, yes, I'm the Messiah, and here is the proof, he evaded their questions. He didn't answer. I'm talking about truth. Many times, truth plays hide and seek. Allow me to illustrate this way. Back in 1972, I was visited by a missionary from old Mexico who was doing some deputation for his mission work in the Akron, Ohio area, and he made the mission his base, so to speak, and he would travel out in the surrounding country and preach, representing his work. He'd been there for a few days, and he said to me one morning, he said, Bruce, how would you like to go for an airplane ride? Well, really, I didn't want to go. I'd rather go fishing, and I don't like to fish. Now, I don't mind fishing if the fish know what we're doing, but I don't get a kick out of washing worms. And I really didn't want to go, but I didn't want to hurt his feelings, and so I said, all right, you're going to be here for a few weeks. We'll see if we can work it out. He said, let's go today. I said, all right, we'll go this afternoon. He said, let's go now. Boy, he was excited. We got in my car, and I drove to the closest airport that I knew anything about. I jumped out. He got out his side. He seemed to know what he was doing. I followed him to this little white building. He walked up to a man behind the desk. He said, "I'd like to rent a plane and take my friend," pointing to me, "for a ride." The man was all smiles. He reached in the drawer, got out a form, reached in his pocket, got out a pen, filled in the date. My friend gave his name, and he said, "What is your address?" And my friend said, "Texas." "I'm a missionary to old Mexico." The man put his pen back. He said, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't rent you a plane. You live out of state. And our insurance doesn't allow us to rent planes to people from out of state. You might get in that plane and head for Texas." We couldn't put up a roadblock very easy. And our insurance just doesn't allow us to rent planes to people from out of state. However, if your friend, pointing to me, wants a ride, we have a special this week, he can take a lesson cheaper than you could have rented a plane and given him a ride. My friend patted me on the back. He said, "I'll pay for the lesson." And I said to myself, how in the world do I get in these messes? I don't want a ride. I know I don't want a lesson. Well, I said, "It's getting late." He said, "It's not even noon yet." I said, "Couldn't we come back?" He said, "We're already here." The next thing I knew, $16.50 was on the table, and it wasn't my money. My name was signed on the form, and I hadn't signed it. An instructor was called from the back room. We shook hands, headed outside. He was probably trying to make small talk. He said to me, "So you want to learn how to fly, huh?" I thought, boy, this is as good a time as any. I said, "No." That kind of stopped him. He said, "You don't want to learn how to fly, yet you're taking a lesson." So I told him the whole story. My friend here just got his pilot's license, and he thinks everybody ought to be sprouting wings. I don't like planes. He wants to give me a ride, but they won't rent him a plane because he lives out of state, so he's paying for me to get a lesson. "Oh, well," he said, "it's not costing you anything." He resumed walking. I followed him to a little Cessna 150. He said, "Now, by law, I'm supposed to pre-flight the airplane and point out some important parts. For instance," he said, "that's the wheels down there. Wings up above your head, motors in the front, tails in the back. Hop in." I hopped in one side. He hopped in the other. He said, "Do you know anything about flying?" I said, "Let's get this straight. I don't know anything about flying. I don't want to know anything about flying. I don't want to be in this plane. Take me for a little ride. My friend will be happy, and that'll be the end of it." "Well," he said, "it is a lesson. Do as much as you can. For instance," he said, "you could start it. It's like a car. You just turn the key." Well, I didn't think I could mess that up very bad. Key was in the ignition, so I gave it a twist. It was spring-loaded. The prop began to swing. The motor began to fire. All of a sudden, there's a big roar of the motor. The instrument started shaking. I was doing a little bit of shaking myself. I tried to keep my hands off of everything. I didn't want to mess anything up. He pushed in the throttle, got it out of the grass on the taxiway. And all the time he's taxiing the plane, he's assuring me there's nothing to it. Why, these things are engineered. They'll fly themselves. And I'm agreeing with him. I want to keep him in a good mood. "Yes, sir, you're right." "Why," he says, "aviation's the coming thing." I said, "That's right." "Why," he said, "man has put his footprint upon the moon." I said, "He sure did." Boy, I'm trying to keep him happy. I'm not going to argue with him. The next thing I know, we're on the runway. No other planes around, kind of a quiet day, little country airport. He looks at me with a big smile. He said, "These things will fly themselves. All you got to do is push the throttle in. Do you think you could push the throttle in?" "Well," I said, "I'm not the smartest fellow in the world, but I could push the throttle in. When do you want me to do it?" He said, "Now'd be fine." Big red knob, hard to miss. I grabbed it and gave it a healthy push. As far as it'd go. Big roar of the engine, and we started down the runway. I looked over at my instructor to get a little idea of what I was supposed to do. I saw that he had his hands folded in his lap, and he's looking out his window at his wheel. So I folded my hands in my lap, and I looked out my window at my wheel. I saw that it was there and rolling, and I lost interest in the wheel. I looked back at my instructor. He's still watching his wheel. I thought maybe I missed something about my wheel. I gave another quick look, picked up, it was black, looked like it needed tread. Other than that, it was a wheel. Nobody had a hold of the steering wheel. I looked out the window, the front window, and I saw that we're going at a terrific rate of speed. The torque of the engine going this way, the prop swinging this way, the wings counteracted this way. My wing is down at the grass. The wind isn't coming straight at us. It's coming at an angle, and we're slowly being pushed off the hardtop runway until my wheel's at the edge of the runway and my wings hit into high weeds, and we're running out of runway. We're coming up on a fence. As politely as the circumstances allowed, I grabbed his elbow and shook him a little bit, and I said, "It's not flying itself." I said, "You better fly this plane." He unfastened his seatbelt, put one hand on the dash, the other hand on the back of my seat, and began to scream in my ear, "We're going to wreck, we're going to wreck, we're going to wreck, we're going to wreck." And I believed every word of it. You don't know what sweat is. I just thought I'd sweated before. Rivers of sweat. My knees are knocking. He's screaming, "We're going to wreck, we're going to wreck, we're going to wreck." And I said, "I know it." He's made a firm believer. I said, "We're going to hit that fence. We're going to take a flip." I said, "Fly this plane." He's screaming, "We're going to wreck, we're going to wreck." I thought, he doesn't mean that. You know, you're teaching someone how to drive a car. You say, "Look out, you're going to hit that tree." You don't mean they're going to hit the tree. You mean they're going to scare the bark off of it. If you really thought they was going to hit the tree, you'd be grabbing the wheel or hitting the brake. And I thought maybe he's wanting me to do something, and then when he sees that I really don't know how to fly, he'll take over. So I grabbed the wheel. The fence is right there. I just jerked her straight back. We shot straight up in the air. All I could see sky. Then I thought, we're going over backwards. I pushed the wheel back in. We did one of these numbers. About all we did was ran down the runway and jumped the fence. We're going through a farmer's field. There's a farmer out there plowing with his tractor. We went over and blew his hat off. He's screaming, "We're going to wreck, we're going to wreck, we're going to wreck." We came to the fence at the other side of the field, and I jumped that fence. There was some trees, and I went around the trees. We came to some high-tension lines. I thought, I can't go around these. Do I go over them or under them or through them? I finally pulled the wheel back and got higher than the fence. My knees are still knocking. My shirt's dripping wet. He's screaming, "We're going to wreck, we're going to wreck." I finally got high enough. I saw I wasn't going to hit anything, and I tried to calm myself down. Swallowed a couple of times, and I said in a very manly voice, "What do I do now?" He said, "I thought you didn't know how to fly." I said, "Buddy, I don't." He said, "Turn that way," and I did. Turn that way, and I did. We did that for 20 minutes. He said, "Okay." He said, "We're going to land." I said, "Where do you get we're going to land?" I said, "There's no way I can land this airplane." "Oh," he said, "there's nothing to it. These things will land themselves. All you got to do is point at the runway and pull the power back." Seemed like I'd heard something like that before. I said, "You said that about the takeoff." He said, "I'll admit that was a little hairy, but this won't be so bad. Point at the runway and pull the power back." I said, "I don't want to." He said, "Don't you want to learn how to fly?" "No," I said, "I told you I don't want to learn how to fly." Well, he said, "I'm being paid to give you a lesson." I said, "Cheat, I'll never tell them. You land it, boy, they'll never find out from me." He said, "I think you're scared." "Yeah." He said, "I don't want you to go through life afraid of airplanes." He said, "You try to land it, and if things don't go right," he said, "I'll land it." I said, "None of this wreck stuff." He said, "I'll land it." I said, "Get her ready." He talked on the radio, made some adjustments, did some turns. Next thing I knew, we're headed for the runway. He said, "It's your plane." He let go of the wheel with two wheels. I grabbed mine, boy, I bared down. My knuckles is white. I'm holding that wheel straight. We're headed right for the runway. Now, I kept the wheel tight. I kept the wings level, but the trouble was the wind wasn't coming straight at us. It was coming at an angle, and it was slowly pushing us sideways. Now, we were lined up with the runway for a while. Then we was lined up with the grass. And I said, that's not too bad. I'll settle for a grass landing. Then we was lined up with a row of trees. I said, that'll never work. I'll just sneak her back to the runway. So I cut the wheel. We passed the grass, came to the runway. I straightened it up, and we kept going. That whoop went a little too far there. I'll get her this time. Next thing I knew, we was just swooping back and forth. We was passing the runway. He said, power, power, pull back the power. I grabbed the big red knob and yanked her almost off. And the prop, put, put, and we start this falling stuff. We're not going forward, we're falling. I could see the way we're going. We're not going to hit the end of the runway. About 20 feet, this side of the runway is a big mud puddle. We're going to splat right in the middle of that. So I pulled the wheel back, tried to lift up the nose and extend the flight. When I did that, a red light on the dash and a horn. Beep, 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 beep. Well, I didn't know too much, but I figured that red light and horn meant something was wrong. So I quit. I let go of the wheel. I turned to my instructor. I said, I can't land this thing. I can't keep it straight for one thing. And then that light and that horn, I said, just land it. He unfastened his seatbelt, put one hand on the dash, the other hand on the back of my seat, and began to scream in my ear, we're going to wreck, we're going to wreck, we're going to wreck, we're going to wreck. I grabbed his arm, and I said, I know we're going to wreck. You said you'd land this plane. He's screaming, we're going to wreck, we're going to wreck. And I thought, it looks like this nut wants to wreck. I told him I don't know how to fly. I pushed the throttle about halfway back in. We passed the mud puddle. We're swooping around. I finally pulled the power back and gritted my teeth and hung on for dear life. We fell out of the sky from 30 feet. Whammo! We hit the runway. We bounced up about 30 feet. We was taking 30-foot hops. Whammo! Whammo! We finally came down sideways. The wing went over to the runway, almost rolled the wheel off, shot us out in the field, and we spun like a top. My heart's beating like a tack hammer. My knees are sore. I'm about out of sweat. I looked over at my instructor, and he's shaking. I thought I scared him. Then I said, he ought to be scared. I told him I couldn't fly. He made me do it. He mumbled something, pushed in the throttle, got it up out of the mud and onto the taxiway, and we went up over a knoll to where the little building was. My friend came running out. He says, wasn't that great? I said, no. Well, he said, didn't you enjoy the scenery? I said, scenery? I was too scared to enjoy any scenery. Let me finish the true story that I'm telling you. The flight instructor that gave me the first lesson that I didn't want was a part-time flight instructor and a full-time policeman. He was also selling drugs through the mafia. The police caught him and said, we're giving you 2 weeks, and then you're going to jail. He filed bankruptcy, sued his wife for divorce, took out double insurance, told his best friend, I'm going to get killed in an airplane. Approximately 2 weeks after he gave me the lesson that I didn't want, he got another student in the plane and buried the motor 4 feet in the ground. They couldn't open either casket. A true story. I'm talking about the element of truth. Are you listening to me? The children of Israel put their faith in the spiritual leaders of their time. And their spiritual leaders said, this man is an imposter. Crucify him. And the children of Israel said, let his blood be upon us and our children and our children's children. And they were wrong. Oh, they had a lot that they were right on. They believed in the Messiah. They believed in God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. They believed in Abraham, Isaac and Jacob? Well, they was God's chosen people. They was just wrong on one little thing. They didn't check his birth certificate. Young people, are you listening to me? I'm talking about the element of truth. I'm safe in saying probably all of you have had enough truth at the age you are now to save the entire world. You've heard messages after message. You've been to camp meeting. You've been to revivals. I'm talking about truth. You already have way more truth than the children of Israel had when they rejected Christ. And I wonder if you have rejected Christ. If you've crucified him in your life. I'm talking about the element of truth. God doesn't owe you any more truth than he's already given you. Do you suppose if I'd have known the truth that that fellow was trying to kill me and him both, that I'd have got in the plane with that fellow? Not on your life. I had faith. He's an instructor. He's hired by the airport. Naturally, he's an honest man. But I was wrong. I was almost dead wrong. Talking about truth. Now, it's not that I was embarrassed. I wasn't a bit afraid to ask for help. I wasn't a bit timid. I mean, I got his attention. It's just that my faith was grounded in the wrong source. I'm talking about the element of truth. I deal with alcoholics. And do you know what the alcoholics tell me? 80% claim it wasn't the bad kid on the block that gave them their first drink and introduced them to drugs, but it was mom or dad. Did you hear that? 80% of the alcoholics claim their parents gave them their first drink in their own home. I'm talking about truth. You'd think you could trust mom and dad. Young people, truth is there, but you've got to seek it. You've got to be pursuing truth if it's to be found. In spite of that bad beginning, I realized that if I could fly, it would help me because I do an awful lot of traveling. So, believe it or not, I went back to the same airport, different instructor, of course, and I took a few lessons. My second lesson, the first one that I wanted, I said to the instructor, "You want me to take it off?" "Oh," he said, "you could never take it off on your second lesson." I said, "Buddy, that's what you think." I took about 3 lessons there, and then I was down in North Carolina, and I took about 7 more lessons, a total of 10 hours, and I soloed. I had what is called a solo license, which meant I could get in the plane, circle the field, and land, but I had to stay within sight of the field, maximum 25 miles from the field. I had to preach up in Michigan. I came home from the south and found a plane for sale, a Cessna 150, for $3,600. I borrowed the $3,000 from the bank and bought the plane. I had to preach up in Michigan, approximately close to 400 miles from where I lived there in Barberton. I would have to drive about 400 miles, preach for 45 minutes, and then drive back at 400 miles. It's a lot of driving for just a little bit of preaching. And I thought, if I could just fly up there, sure saved me a lot of time. A man was visiting the mission, a local man from the Barberton area, and he said, "I understand you got a plane." I said, "We've just had it a few days. We just got the plane." He said, "You know, I've had my license for 40 years. I looked at him and I said, "What are you doing Saturday?" "Oh," he said, "it's my day off." I said, "If you've got license, how about flying with me to Michigan? I've got the plane. You'd be the pilot in command. It'd be 100% legal." He said, "It's a deal." I met him Saturday morning, bright and early at the airport. I've got the oil checked, tanks filled. I'm waiting for him to come. He pulled up in his car, got out, we shook hands, greeted each other. He reached in his pocket and pulled out his billfold and fumbled around until he found his pilot's license. He said, "Here it is." I really didn't want to look at his pilot's license. I wanted to get in the air and fly, but out of courtesy, I looked at it and I said, "Yeah, that's just about 40 years. I think it was 39 or something like that." He put his license back in his pocket. He said, "How are you going to navigate? How are you going to know if you're headed for Michigan? And how are we going to know when we get there?" I said I had wondered about that, so I brought along a road map. I'm going to follow 21 north to the Turnpike, take the Ohio Turnpike to Toledo, pick up 23 out of Toledo north to 96, 96 to 27, 27 on north. Well, he said it will work. Might take a little longer, but it'll work. That made me feel a little better. I started up the plane, pushed in the throttle, ran down the runway, coaxed the yoke back, we're airborne. Without any trouble, I found the Turnpike. I'm recognizing there's the gas station where I used to buy gas. There's a pond, and I'm seeing sights. There's a restaurant where I've stopped and had a meal before. I'm recognizing landmarks. I know where I am. I've traveled that area. I fly along towards Toledo, and I see a cloud maybe about the size of this building. I'd never been that close to a cloud before, so I flew over to the cloud. Wasn't much out of my way, and I flew around the cloud. I'm having fun. I flew on towards Toledo, and I saw another cloud. Pretty soon I saw a whole lot of clouds. Finally, that's all I could see is clouds. I said to my friend, I can't see the Turnpike. He said, I can't either. I said, how are we going to know where we are? He said, I was wondering the same thing. I said, maybe we better get below these clouds. He said, that sounds like a winner. I pulled carburetor heat, pulled the power back, put that thing in a screaming dive, and leveled off below the clouds. There was the Turnpike, sighed a big sigh of relief, snuggled up to the Turnpike, and made it to Toledo. Without any trouble, by the time I got to Toledo, it was raining a little bit, but I just stayed close to the Turnpike. I stayed far north until the storm really broke out. The only thing I knew to do was to stay below the clouds, so I kept pushing the wheel over, getting lower and lower, till finally I'm right over the highway. The little kids in the car's waving at us, and we're waving to the little kids in the car. The mothers are kind of ducking as we go over. Every now and then we come to a bridge and cross this four-lane highway, and I'd have to go up almost into the clouds to get past the bridge and then back down again. It's raining. It's hard to see. We come to 96, which makes a left-hand turn, heads almost due west, a little northwest, towards Lansing. I banked her to the left, and I'm following 96 towards Lansing. I have a Shell road map. Shell maps have most of the airports marked on them. And I see here's a little town, Howe, Michigan. I'm sure you know where that is. Here's Howe, Michigan. Here's 96, four-lane highway, and here's a little airport right there, right by the four-lane highway. I turn my radio on. Most airports use the same frequency, 122.8. I call the airport. They call most airports Unicoms. I say, Howe Unicom, this is Cessna 150 4045U. That's the numbers written on the side of the plane. Over the static, a man's voice says, 45U, this is Howe Unicom. What can I do for you? I ask, do you have 80-octane fuel? He answers, yes, we do. My next question is, what is your active runway? In other words, what direction are the planes landing? That's a little safer if all the planes land the same way. He said, help yourself. There's nobody else flying today but you. That made me wonder a little bit. I'm over this four-lane highway, kind of to the right of the four-lane highway. I'm at the tops of the trees. I mean, right there's the clouds. I'm flying along and through the rain and haze. There's the airport. I just pulled over and stopped. It was about as easy a landing as you could do because it had been half landed for the last 40 miles. I got out of the plane, walked up to a little building, and said to a fellow, fill it up. He walked over to the tanks, had an umbrella. I walked into this little building, and a bunch of fellows are sitting around with their hand on their chin. One fellow looked at me, and he said, did you just land in that little thing? I said, yeah. He says, pretty soupy out there, isn't it? Oh, I said, it's the worst I've ever seen. Of course, it's about all I've ever seen. He said, don't you get low? I said, low? I said, you're right there. He said, don't you get scared? Oh, I said, when you come to bridges. He said, don't hit any bridges. I said, I won't do it on purpose. He said, well, how in the world do you know where you are? You're so low, your instruments can't be working. Oh, I said, we're following the road signs. We got a road map. Says so many miles to the next town. Boy, he said, I've heard of everything now. We paid for the fuel. Just as we was walking out, a twin engine landed. I waited till the fellow stopped, taxied, got out, and I said, where are you coming from? He said, Saginaw, Michigan, north of here. I said, what's the weather like north of here? He said, 20 miles north of here, you come out of the storm. I said to my friend, we can hold our breath that long. Going 100 miles an hour doesn't take long to go 20 miles. He jumped in the plane. I started up. We took off. We didn't go 3 miles till it quit raining. A couple more, and it just the clouds dissipated. We came right out of the storm. We actually came to the storm, under the storm. Here we are on the other side. Without any events worth mentioning, I made my way to the little town near the church camp, was met by someone from the camp, represented the mission Saturday afternoon. The next thing I know, we're back at the airport, tanks are filled, and we're headed home. I'm up to 10,000 feet. Of course, I know now that you're supposed to be at certain altitudes for certain flight of direction flight. Back then, I didn't know that, and 10,000 sounded like a good round figure. I'm taking every shortcut I can think of. I'm not going due south over 27 to 96, and then 96 over by Detroit. I'm cutting across, because I want to get home before it gets dark, because I've never been up at night before. I'm taking every shortcut I can take. Finally, off in the distance, I know I'm coming up on Toledo when the sun winks its last goodbye. It's a beautiful sight, beautiful sunset, if you're not scared. Trouble is, I'm scared. Towns are beginning to sparkle like jewels on satin. Beautiful sight. Now, I know that's Toledo. That big glow out there, that's Toledo. I say to my friend, maybe we ought to stop and refuel about half a tank. He said, that sounds like a good idea. I turn on the radio. I find a little airport south of town, and I say, what time was you closing? The man said, well, I was just closing. Are you in the area? Well, I said, I'm just north of Toledo. I wanted to refuel. Oh, he said, I'll stay open for you. I fly to Toledo. I fly past Toledo. I don't see anything that looks like an airport. I say to my friend, did you see the airport? No, but he said, we ought to see it. Well, I said, we ought to be there. Don't you see it? No, he said, but we ought to see it. Let's keep looking. Pretty soon over the radio, a man says, 452, that's my number. Where are you? I grabbed the mic. I said, looking for the airport, sir. He said, well, you should have been here by now. Blink your landing lights. I thought, landing lights? I don't even know if this plane's got landing lights. I'd never looked for a switch. There was a little box there of switches. I ran down. One of them said landing lights. I had a big sigh of relief, pulled it out. A beacon shone in front of me. I blinked it about 3 times. Oh, he said, I see you. You passed me. Turn around. I turned around, headed back for this town. He said, that's it. You're headed right for me. I said, sir, I'm headed for the whole town. Well, he said, I'm part of that town. I said, yeah, but I don't know what part. I said, how about you blinking your lights? Well, he said, I've never done that before, but I guess I could. He must have pulled some master switch. A whole section of that town started winking at me. I said, keep blinking, I see you. I had to fly out over Lake Erie, and I didn't like that very much. And just as I was coming in, I said to my friend, boy, if we ever get out of this thing, let's spend the night. Let's get a hotel or a motel. There's 2 wings. You pick one. Anything, but let's spend the night. When I landed, he patted me on the back. He said, that was the best night landing I have ever seen. I said, no fooling. He said, no fooling. Now, he said, there's no need for us to spend the night. He said, if you can land like that, he said, you let me navigate. You just land when we get there. I said, okay, but it's your ball game from here on out. This night stuff scares me. We filled the tanks, back in the plane, and I'd never taxied on an airport at night before, and there was all these blue lights, and I didn't know where I was, and I kind of roamed around the airport till I found the runway. At least I thought it was the runway. I got out on the runway, and I said to my friend, would you like to pray? And he said, yes, and he prayed, and then I prayed, and I said, would you like to pray again? He said, I don't believe so. I said, well, I think I do. Boy, I prayed for everything I could think of. I didn't leave many missionaries out. I finally said, well, here it is. I guess we're going. I pushed in the throttle. We ran down the runway, gained airspeed, about 38, 40 miles an hour. I coaxed the yoke back. The nose wheel lifted off. We're airborne. We got up about 30 feet, 20 feet, and everything went black. It's called a dark spot. The most critical time of flying is the takeoff. Everybody's afraid of the landing, but really the most critical time is the takeoff. When you take off, the nose is up, especially at night. The plane gets so high, and the body of the plane, the fuselage, hides the runway lights. Now, when you're down here, you can see them out there, but as you go up, they come in and you can't see them. You're too low to see the lights of the town. You're not quite higher than the tops of the trees. It's called a dark spot. At that particular time, you fly by instruments. I didn't know anything about a black spot. I've had no instrument training. We went up about 20, 30 feet, and everything went black. Now, you understand, all my life I've been raised in a good Christian home, been around a lot of camp meetings and a lot of revivals, and I've heard a lot of evangelists say, one of these days, Russia's going to attack, and when they do, there'll be a blackout. Mark my word. Oh, when I was a little kid, it used to scare me. I used to get up at night and turn the light on, make sure Russia hadn't attacked. Hard to go to sleep when you're 9 years old, turn the light on every 15 minutes. We got up about 30 feet, and everything went black, and my friend screamed, and he grabbed my arm. Who turned the lights out? I said, Russia. He said, what did they do that for? I said, they just attacked. I knew it was coming, been warned all my life. We got up about another 20 feet. We got higher than the trees, and we saw the lights of the town. He said, they got them back on. I said, shortest war in history. I put that plane in a steep bank. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm turning this thing around. I said, we must be scared. Think Russia attacked because it got dark. Well, he said, now don't panic. We got confused. He said, circle and get our nerve up. So I started circling. I'm going higher and higher. He said, picture Ohio in your mind. That's easy enough. He said, where are we? I said, we're in the northwest corner. He said, where's Akron? I said, well, it's kind of southeast of here. He said, put it in degrees. Well, east 90, south 180. I said, 150. He said, I believe that'll do her. Turned to 150 degrees. We've got 100 miles to go. Our airspeed indicator says we're going 100. We fly for 1 hour, and we'll be there. I said, is it that easy? He said, it's that easy. I turn it to 150 degrees. The road map's not doing me any good, so I threw that in the back. I reached in the glove box, and there's an aviation map. I pull that out. The fellow said to me about the day before, he said, if you're going to fly, you ought to have an aviation map. So I bought one, $1.08. Now they're close to $3. I bought it for $1.08, opened it up, and he said, there's an airport. I said, yep, that looks like one. That's all the map training I've had. But now I'm desperate. I get the map out, open up on my lap, and I find Toledo, and I find Akron. And I see strategically located around the big cities is a circle on the map with a number in it. I see there's a circle around Akron. There's a circle around Toledo. I see that on the dash is a circle that looks exactly like the circle on the map. Nobody has ever said to me, that's how you navigate. I'm just kind of curious, and it looks kind of obvious. So I turn the navigating part of the radio on. Up until today, I've never turned it on before. I turn it on. I see the number around Akron, 112.4. So I put that in the little window, 112.4. I turn the needle till the little hand stops swinging. 120 degrees, and the word, the direction to, lights up in a little window, all in that circle. I say to myself, it looks like to get to the center of this circle, and this circle happens to be by Akron, Ohio, I fly 120 degrees. I'd guessed 150. That wasn't too far off. I correct a little to the left till the compass says 120. The needle says straight down. I'm over this imaginary line going straight to the center of that circle. I say to myself, I wonder what would happen if I'd go wrong. So very slowly I turn it to the right. Pretty soon that needle starts swinging to the left. The imaginary line that I'm supposed to be following is over that way. I correct 120 degrees and the needle straightens up. I think, man, you can't beat this. Cars ought to have these. Just tune in Kmart and you'd be all right. We fly for 45 minutes and the needle takes a flip. The little word to disappears and the word from lights up. And we pass a big town. I say to my friend, we did it. He said, did what? I said, we just flew to Akron. He said, where's Akron? I said, that town. He said, what makes you think that's Akron? I said, that little needle flipped. He said, who told you how to run one of those flipping things? Well, I said, nobody, but it looks like that's the way it operates. Hear me, young people. There's a lot of folks that get close. They'll go to church. They'll read their Bible. They'll pray. But they don't get in. And young people getting close doesn't count. The children of Israel were close. Look at all the pluses they had. They were God's chosen people. They were keeping the law. They were looking for the Messiah. Why, there's a lot of things they were doing. They were close. They just wrong on birth certificate. One little thing. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. You know down in your heart whether you're saved or not. Someone said, we don't go by feelings. Well, I go by feelings. I either feel like I'm a Christian or I don't feel like it. Does that mean you're shouting happy all the time? No. But sometimes even when I'm discouraged and depressed, I still know I haven't sinned. So I'm still going by feelings. I don't want you to get hung up on that. But it's a fact. I know when I've done something wrong. I know if I need to ask someone to forgive me if I've hurt someone's feelings. You don't have to go by question marks. You can know. Well, the children of Israel knew a lot, but they was wrong in one thing. I'm talking about the truth. I said to my friend, I said, all we got to do is go about 8 miles in that direction, and we'll be at Wadsworth. That's where our car is. There's no need calling a cab. We can just fly that 8 miles. I pushed in the throttle. We ran down the runway. I coaxed the yoke back. We're airborne. We got up about 20 feet. Everything went black. I just held on, got another 20 feet, and everything is all right. I got an idea. Why couldn't I take 2 of these circles and get a cross-check and tell me exactly where I am? Now, young people, there's a lesson here. I knew that I only had to go 8 miles that way. I knew that all I had to do was go due east. The airport was going east and west, and I took off due east. I knew all I had to do was go to the next little town. I'd see the town, look down at it, just 3 or 4 miles. And there was Route 57. All I had to do was make a left-hand turn and follow Route 57, and it actually went out around the airport that I wanted to go to. I couldn't miss it. But you know what? I was wanting more facts and more facts. So I said to my friend, you fly the plane. I want to check something. There's where I made a mistake. Young people, when God tells you to do something, don't keep begging him for more proof and more proof and more proof. Believe him. When he says make a restitution, don't say, well, Lord, just give me 3 fleeces and then I'll know I'm supposed to make the restitution. No. If he's convicted you, that's all you need. Well, if somebody will just come and say something, then I'll know. No, if God's convicted you, that knowledge is all the conviction you need. If you know you've done something wrong, you don't need any more conviction than that to make it right. You can get hung up on proving until you'll become confused. I gave him the controls. I looked down at the map. I don't think it took 30 seconds to get the number and put it in the wheel. The only thing I can figure is when I look at the map, he must have looked over my shoulder at the map and he dropped the left wing and put that thing in a bank. He looked up a little before I did and saw the plane was in a bank, and he straightened it out. He thought the plane just took a dip, when in reality it did a U-turn. We're going the opposite direction. It's called a 180. We weren't going east, we're going west. I didn't feel the plane turn. I'm looking at the map. Took about 30 seconds to put the numbers up there. You know, it's like a bucket and water. You can swing that bucket of water and the water doesn't fall out. It thinks everything's down. Well, that plane turned and I didn't know it was turning. I looked up. I didn't feel the plane turn, but I looked at the compass and it said west. I thought, we just left Smithville and we was going due east. I didn't feel this thing turn. I put my hand over the compass, and I said, what direction are we going? He said, due east. I took my hand off the compass, and it said west. I said, what about that? Oh, he said, that's wrong. I said, what about this compass? It says west. There were two compasses in the plane, a magnetic compass and an electric gyro compass. He said, that's wrong too. I said, do both compasses go out at the same time very often? Oh, no, he said, it's very rare. I said, what do we do? He said, just keep going east. We flew for a couple of minutes and came to a four-lane highway. He said, what four-lane highway would we come to if we left Smithville and went due east? I said, that's easy, Route 77. He said, there it is, Route 77. I said, that's not Route 77 because I see a rest area, and Route 77 doesn't have any rest areas. It does now, but it didn't back in 1972. He said, maybe they just installed one. Isn't it amazing how we can rationalize for what we want to believe? You can make yourself believe anything you want to believe. I said, that doesn't look like new grass to me. Didn't have one this morning. I put that plane in he said, turn to the left and you'll be going north. That's all right if you've been going east. I put her in the bank to the left and both compasses swung south. I've been thinking all day long these compasses haven't lied to me. A couple times I thought I caught him in something he wasn't sure about. I put that plane in a steep bank. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going back north. He said, we're going north. I said, that's not what the compass says. He says, man, don't you have faith? I've had my license for 40 years. I said, yeah, I've got faith in the compass. He started wringing his hands and started praying. I said, now don't panic. You'll admit we're over a four-lane highway. Yeah, he said, I can see that. And I said, we're probably still in Ohio. Yeah, he said, we're probably still in Ohio. I said, why don't we swoop down over this four-lane highway and read an exit sign? These four-lane highways have exit signs, you know, about 8, 10, 16 foot long and about 4 or 5 foot high, and great big reflectors spelling out the names of the town, arrows pointing and how many miles to those towns. I said, probably we'll recognize the two towns and we'll know what four-lane highway goes between them. But if we don't, we can look it up on the road map. It's in the back. Boy, he said, that might work. I said, we'll know exactly where we are. I said, you read the road sign, I'll fly the airplane. I pulled carburetor heat, I pulled the power back, and then I hit the master switch to turn the lights off on the outside on the wing tips and the tail and turn out the lights inside the plane because I didn't want to scare anyone. I came zooming out of the sky and I leveled off a little above the trees over this four-lane highway. I tried not to scare anyone, but 3 cars hit the ditch. Zoom, zoom, zoom. One car screeched to a halt underneath the bridge, and a guy jumped out and peeked around the pillars we went over. Came out in the paper the next day, unidentified objects sighted all over Route 71 last night. I lost a lot of faith in UFOs right there. I said to my friend, did you read the exit sign? No, he said, I was watching that car hit the ditch. I pushed in the throttle, jumped up about 1,000 feet, and I said to my friend, what's emergency frequency? He said, I forgot. I'd never learned it. Well, I said, I'm going to ask someone. He said, you feel okay? He said, who are you going to ask? There's only me and you. I said, I'm going to ask the radio. I got off the map, and it told me Akron-Canton's tower, so I turned the tower frequency, and I said, Akron-Canton Tower, this is Cessna 150, 4045U. Could you tell me emergency frequency? He said, 45U. Are you in trouble? Well, I said, kinda. I said, we're lost. He said, you're in trouble. 121.1. I wrote that down on the map, 121.1. I turned to 121.1 and I thought, what in the world do you say when you're lost? My friend said, what's wrong? I said, I'm trying to think of what to say. He said, say anything. I said, you can't say help. I said, you got to say something intelligent. About that time, over the radio, a man's voice says, 45U, do you copy emergency frequency? I said, they're calling us. I grabbed the mic. I said, this is 45U. He said, how are you? I said, fine, thank you. How are you? I said, wait a minute. I said, I'm not that good. I said, I'm lost. He said, well, where do you think you are? Well, I said, if I thought I knew where I was, I wouldn't think I was lost. He said, the last time you knew where you were, where were you? I said, Smithville. And I wished it had stayed there. I said, that's about an hour ago. I said, I'm going 100 miles an hour. I don't think I'm at Smithville now. Well, he said, I'll check. Well, I said, I don't think I'm there. Well, he said, I'll check. He came back about 10 minutes. Well, he said, you're not over Smithville. That wasn't much comfort. He said, what does your compass say? I said, I don't want to tell you. Oh, he said, you got to tell me what your compass says. No, I said, I think it's wrong. No, he said, you just think it's wrong. It's probably right. No, I said, I know it's wrong. Because my friend found a screwdriver in the glove box, and he's been adjusting the compass to the Big Dipper. Yep, there she is. There's the old Milky Way. I said, I know it's wrong. He had the screws off of it, the top off of it, everything turned around, put the whole thing back together again. He had it saying due south, and we was actually going due north. Let me tell you, friend, when you start fooling with a compass, you're in trouble. You don't dare fool with a compass. You can make this compass say anything you want it to say. You can fool around and adjust it and readjust it and tear it apart and take this word out and that word out, and all you'll do is get it saying south when you're actually going north. I was preaching in the southern part of Indiana, and a woman came up to me and she said, oh, I used to think those things was wrong, but she said, I kept asking God, and God finally said, it's okay, you can go ahead and do it. And I said, lady, the sad thing is you have fooled with God's word and God until finally God has started to fool with you. He said, I'll give them over to believe a lie and to be damned. Do you know what he said about his own people? He said, don't even pray for them anymore. So I don't want you to pray their name. You don't dare fool with the compass, friend. Don't adjust it to your stars, to your whims. I had a fellow come to the mission, and he said he wanted to take his life, wanted to commit suicide. And so the other worker said, maybe I better talk to him. And so I got him into the office there and counseled with him. And he said, well, it's all right. The Bible said it's okay for me to take my life. I said, no, the Bible doesn't say that. Yes, he said it does. He said, let me show you right over here. He said, looky here where Judas committed suicide. He said, see that right there? And I said, well, yeah, I see that. He said, now watch here. I turned over about 6 pages. He said, look here at this verse. Go thou and do likewise. He said, see? I said, what about all those pages in between? He said, I don't want those pages. I just want those 2 verses. Now, I'll admit he is a little off. But you know, I found people that'll do the same thing. They'll pick out one verse or one phrase or one thought and try to govern their whole lives or justify some sin by that verse of Scripture. I'm talking, young people, about playing with a compass. I looked out the window and I saw an intersection of the Ohio Turnpike intersecting another 4-lane highway, Route 71. But you know what I said? I said, that can't be the Turnpike. That can't be Route 71, because that's way north. And my compass says south. And my friend keeps saying, don't forget, we're going south. Don't forget, we're going south. Don't forget, we're going south. Are you listening to me? by him just saying, I knew he was wrong. I saw him fool with it myself. Yet him saying that, don't forget we're going south. Don't forget we're going south. Till I started saying, don't forget we're going south. And I said, that can't be the turnpike because that's way north. Are you listening to me? That's the danger of running with the wrong crowd. Eve ran with the wrong crowd, and the wrong crowd said, God hath not said. Did God really mean? Why, didn't you know? And the next thing, Eve began to parrot what Satan said. Why, it's good for food. She ate and her husband ate, and they committed the first sin. I'm talking about running with the wrong crowd. You know what I said? I said, I won't even look at that intersection because it'll only confuse me. Think of that. There was the facts, and I was so confused, I didn't want the facts. Do you know that's the hardest job I have ever had to do? To talk to someone that at one time had the facts, rejected the facts, and I've tried to get them to see the facts. That is the hardest job I've ever had. It is easier to deal with an atheist, an agnostic. To camp together, church camp together. We grew up together. About 20-some years, we knew each other as good as you could know a fellow and not be a relative of him. I mean, we knew our family, knew his family. And I said, hey, Bobby, how you doing? He said, good. Working on my doctorate's degree. And I began to talk to him about his studies. And I said, where are you going to church? He went to the same holiness church that I did. His father's a holiness preacher. Oh, he said, I don't go to church anymore. I said, you don't? No, he said, I don't believe that stuff. I said, now, Bobby, wait a minute. We've been the same altar together. We've been the same Sunday school together. Your dad's a holiness preacher. My dad's a holiness preacher. He said, I only thought I was saved. He said, there's no such thing as salvation. He said, I'm going to live forever. I've already given my body to science. He said, they're going to freeze me when I die. And when they find a cure, they're going to thaw me out and cure me, and I'm going to live forever. He said, that's the only eternity that we'll have anything about if science can come up with it. And I said, Bobby, how did you get in this mess? Oh, no, he said, I was in a mess then. Now, he said, I'm straightened out. About 3 years later, he ended up going through a divorce, and then another divorce, and another divorce. He's been through 3 divorces. I'm talking about the truth. The devil, young people, will get you so confused if you reject the light that you'll say, I never knew the truth. The danger of fooling with the truth. I said, I won't even look at that. It'll only confuse me. When I looked up, we flew right into a big black cloud. The prop, don't you see I flew from the light unto darkness? And how great is that darkness? When we flew into that big cloud, the prop hit that moist air, and it sounded like we went into a dive. And my friend screamed, we're diving! I said, don't scream like that. I said, I'm scared enough. He said, we're diving, we're diving. I said, we're not diving. The prop's just hitting this moist air. We flew into a cloud. Yeah, but we're diving. I said, look at that instrument on the dash. It says we're going straight and level. He said, that's broke too. Pull her up, pull her up. Man on the radio said, 452, what's wrong? I grabbed the mic. I said, we flew into a cloud, sir. He said, don't fly into any clouds. I said, I didn't do it on purpose. I don't want to be in this cloud. I said, if you'll quit hollering at me, I'll get out of it. I put the mic down. Now, there's no way I can convey to you the fear. Incidentally, I am repeating this whole story word for word exactly as I've remembered. I've not changed one word in our conversation from the whole story from beginning to end. In fact, I told this story with my friend in the congregation, and afterwards he said, boy, that's exactly what happened. I put that plane in a shallow bank, and I watched the compass as it slowly turned till it finally said north, which would have been south because he had it backwards. I blinked the lights on the tips of the wings, hoping that I could see the lights blink. That cloud was so thick, I couldn't even see the lights blink. Finally, the cloud seemed to part underneath us, and there on the ground was a security light in somebody's backyard. You don't know how much comfort it was to see a security light. You know what I thought? Hey, I'm still right side up. I'm not upside down. That simple fact that I was not upside down was a big comfort to me. The cloud swallowed up that security light, and depression and panic, and I'm fighting the wheel, and I'm fighting to keep control. Finally, the cloud parted again, and there was a light bulb, a naked bulb on somebody's porch. And I thought, a light bulb. We're still right side up. Just been a few seconds. Panic, fear. My friend is screaming, almost hysterical. You know, there's a lot of people that end up in clouds and they die. Now, a cloud can't hurt you. A cloud's just moist air. But when they get in a cloud, they get panicked, and the next thing you know, they go into a tailspin. I heard a tape of a man that actually did this, heard the tape of his voice, begin to scream, help, help, and the plane tore up before it ever hit the ground. With him fighting the controls, tore up the plane. 98 out of every aircraft that wrecks because the pilot doesn't believe the instruments. He takes things into his own hands. Do you know why people go to hell? Because they take things into their own hands. I know more about it than God does. I'm not going to believe the compass. I'll do what seems right to me. There is a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end's destruction. I have been in some storms. Life, young people, are you listening to me? Life will bring you some storms. Life will bring you some clouds. I've been in a few. Thank God I haven't been in too many. And it's wonderful to have some security lights when you're in the storm. It's wonderful when Satan brings some tests and trials to you. It's wonderful to have some concrete security lights to keep your eye on. When others would go down, you can keep your feet on the solid rock. We finally came out of the cloud, and my friend said, look, an airport. There was a flashing light. I grabbed the mic and I said, we're out of the cloud, sir, and I think I see an airport. Man on emergency frequency said, be careful. Some people coming out of storms land at shopping centers. Oh, no, I said, it's an airport because we see a flashing light. I flew over to the flashing light, hoping that it was an airport, and I looked at it, and here it was a police cruiser. I almost landed on a police cruiser. Been a mighty short runway. I grabbed the mic and I said, well, it's not an airport. I said, it's a police cruiser. He said, don't land, don't land, don't land. But then I did see an airport, because right over there, just a few, maybe a mile away, I did see another flashing beacon, and I could see little airplanes on the ground. I said, I do see an airport. I'm positive it's an airport, because I see little planes. Thanks for your help. Click. Turned him off. Said to my friend, quit wringing your hands. We're going to land. There's an airport. I flew over to the airport, got ready to land, and just as I was landing, my friend said, you're going to hit those row of trees. No, I said, I'm not. Yes, he said, you are. We argued back and forth. I finally gave in, pushed in the throttle, jumped up 100 feet. Then it got so high I couldn't land. When I pushed the nose over and went back down to where the runway was on the other side of the trees, I gained airspeed like going down a steep hill. My airspeed started climbing. Then it got so fast you couldn't land. I'm finally leveled off. I'm just about 2 or 3 feet above the runway. I'm saying, down, boy, down, boy. That thing won't land. I'm going about 90 miles an hour. It doesn't make any difference whether you got the motor on or off. If you're still going fast, you won't land. You see, as long as the wind is going over the wing faster than 37 miles an hour in a Cessna 150, it still flies. Well, I'm going 90. You see, the way you land a plane is you get it as close to the ground as you possibly can, preferably over a runway, and you pull the power back. And when the plane slows down and the wind quits going over the wing at about 37, it falls out of the air. Well, it just happens to be about 2 foot off the ground. That's a good landing. In fact, any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. Here I am going 90 miles an hour. If you don't land the first third of the runway, go around. I push in the throttle, jump up in the air, go around the second time. I come in. My friend says trees. I argue. I give in. I gain 100 feet. Then I come down. I gain that airspeed again. 3 times I do the same thing. Of course, now I know how to lose altitude without gaining airspeed. Back then I didn't know all these tricks. Now I've had 4 different planes in about 3,000 hours. Back then I didn't know the tricks. Finally, the 4th time I said, "Can you land this plane?" He said, "I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. I've had my license for 40 years, but I haven't been in a plane for 39. He said, "I've never been up at night before." I said, "Then don't say trees." That time I went over as low as I wanted to the first time, and I landed, and we got out, and the fellow walked up. He said, "Why didn't you land? You went over 4 times. My friend said, "We's looking the field over." I'm talking about truth. Do you suppose if I'd have known the truth, I'd have got in the plane with that fellow? No. I thought he'd had his license for almost 40 years. I put my faith, my life, in his hands. Friends, who have you put your soul in? Are you listening to me? Your soul, you have either placed in the hands of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, or you put it in some habit, or some friend, or some dream. I'm talking about truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. I'm not quite done, but I'm going to quit. I should go for another 5 or 10 minutes, but I'm going to quit. I'm talking about truth. Young people, this youth camp, these few short days, let's be seekers of truth. Do you agree to that? If God brings truth to your heart, embrace it. Don't argue with it. Don't try to understand it. Don't try to categorize it. Just accept it. God, if you tell me, I believe it. If you say I need to do it, I'll do it. If you tell me not to do it, I'll follow the Spirit. You shall know the truth. What did he say? He said, "My spirit shall bear witness with your spirit." You can know the truth, and it's the truth that makes you free. Shall we stand?